the syllabus, and I'm going to start here just to get us caught up on where we are. For yesterday's class, you had the video lecture on Rowlandson and captivity narratives. You contributed to your blogs and you responded to 3 other blogs. For today's class, we have Mather, Byrd, and Edwards, and I'm going to be talking about that in the video lecture for today. For Tuesday, you have a couple things here. You have some readings on Native Americans, Benjamin Franklin, and the blog posts. There's also a quiz on Tuesday. Monday we're off, and I want you to contribute to the terms that you can post on the whole class blog that I have up. I will be looking at what you come up with, comparing it to what I have, and then because I wasn't in the room with you yesterday or today, I'll give you a pretty good idea of what's going to be on the quiz. So there's not some kind of great mystery. The idea is you do have to study for the quiz so that you can show that you know the information. And I'll give you a little bit more on that later on. I will also respond to your blogs probably by looking at several of your blogs at one time in one sitting over the next couple of days. So just stay on top of your email for everything. And then we see as we come down into next week, no class Memorial Day. So what's assigned that I just talked about is really for Tuesday right here in Ben Franklin. I'm going to hop now over to the PowerPoint that I use to take a look at the material, and I'll put it in slideshow right now so you're going to see me go full screen with it. So we're looking at William Byrd. We're looking at Cotton Mather, who's related to Increase Mather. Increase Mather was the editor and promoter of Mary Rowlandson's work. And we're looking at Jonathan Edwards. I suspect you may have heard of Jonathan Edwards before because in a lot of high schools, the sermon Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God is assigned. And he's very well known for that fire and brimstone sermon. One of the things I think about with these texts is they're difficult to read. This is not something you can just tune out on, although it might make you tune out just because of the level of difficulty. I think that if I were to rank them by difficulty, and you may or may not agree with me, and that might be a potential blog post, I find Mather very challenging, Byrd after that, and then Edwards is probably, wait, or did I just do that backwards? Hold on, let me think about this for a second. Yeah, I'm curious actually. I don't know if I agree with my initial assessment on this. So, if you want to write about difficulty of these texts, I'd love to hear that conversation. A lot of the times you come into a classroom, you feel like you can't say what you really think about something and address the difficult aspects of it. This is an open space. That's what I want us to do in this class. If you come in pretending like you love everything you do, and some of you might love everything you do, but you're missing out on the chance to really dig in and offer some genuine criticism of it. So you can move from a critical moment into an analytical moment very easily. So if you said something like, all right, with Jonathan Edwards, he can be difficult to read because X. It's that part where you go into the second half of that because X, that's where the analysis happens. Here's William Byrd. I think we get a lot of mileage out of this portrait. Just look at what he has on. Look at the style of the portrait. Look at what's in the background. You see the ship back there. So from the beginning, he's not really standing for this portrait in front of a window with a ship. The artist puts that in there. So we know that this is very much constructed to show us something about his identity, about his persona, about what Byrd wants you to think of Byrd. I have money. I am an important man. I have enough money to travel. I have traveled. I've gone to the colonies. I've set myself up in Virginia. I'm making money over there. I am of an elite status. You can see this in the clothing I'm wearing. and the way that I'm portrayed, the way I'm standing, the way I'm glowing. So these things in the portrait relate to the writing style, his beliefs. You see this in these questions and points that I have over to the right hand of the slide. And I want you to consider how Byrd's writings contrast with New England. He does have prayers. He does mention things about his lifestyle, but his writing is very different. And in some ways, we might find him a lot more relatable, somebody that we understand, somebody that we feel that we can get into his mind. And there's a few parts of his narrative that are really interesting that I hope you'll bring up in your post. So you can pause on this, grab these questions, grab them off the PowerPoint that I posted under course docs. So if you want to have that follow along or type in that like you may have done yesterday, feel free. So I'm not going to answer these questions. I'm going to pose them. This is Westover Plantation. Maybe some of you have been there. It's only about an hour and a half from Norfolk. I've been there. It's privately owned, so you can't go inside, but the people that live in it, they have it open so that you can walk all over the grounds, you can go in the gardens, and it's a really wonderful day trip if you're looking to go somewhere interesting and beautiful. You might want to go up to Westover and see where William Byrd actually lived. It's pretty rare that we have an opportunity like this. Think of all the people in American literature classes across America and across the world who don't have the 1.5 hour drive to pop up to Westover. They don't have the access we do. So I encourage you to go up there at some time if you have the time to do such a thing. It's a wonderful day trip. I'm shifting quickly out of Virginia because I don't like it when these video lectures get too long. I want to take a look, I want to go back to some of the ideas in Calvinism, and this acronym TULIP is something that is readily available online. You can look up and read more about it. I'm going to touch on it here in this lecture and present the idea of Calvinism as something that's in total contrast to William Byrd's beliefs. And I think that's very obvious when you read Byrd to see what the difference is here. Calvinism we can represent with this acronym TULIP because it gives us these 5 points to use to understand the way a Calvinist would have thought. This thinking influenced the writings we're reading in the class. It influenced the government of the towns and cities these people lived in. And it also still influences many contemporary American religions, the history of religion in America, and again, some of the contemporary thinking that we see now in popular culture and in American culture at large. So our T is for total depravity. This concept, it posits that people are absolutely sinful by nature. People can't independently choose to be good. God has to step in and make them not depraved. So by nature, people are depraved, totally and utterly sinful and fallen, as in the fall from the Garden of Eden, the fall from a state of bliss and innocence, a fall into sinfulness, so totally depraved. The U is for unconditional election. That means that only God chooses who is going to receive grace, who's going to be saved. So this gets back to that idea of predestination that we started talking about the other day. So it's only God's kindness, it's only God's will that chooses people for salvation. If you're not chosen, you're damned and you are going to hell. Cheery stuff. The L is for limited atonement. So even though in the New Testament of the Christian Bible, it says that Jesus died for the sins of mankind, so to speak. Remember, this is all in translation, right? Calvin dug in, took a look at it and said, well, we need to interpret this that God only saved those who are the ones he wanted to choose. It's not based on their personal character. It's based, again, on his will. So this limited atonement concept means that Jesus didn't actually die for the sins of everyone, like you hear in so many churches today. According to Calvin and the Calvinists, the death of Jesus was only for the elect. That's not an easy concept for anybody familiar with today's Christian churches, or maybe some of you who might have grown up affiliated with or are still affiliated with a church that would say that Jesus died for the sins of all. It's limited atonement, not for everyone, only the elect. I is for irresistible grace. God brings those who have been given his grace, to whom he gives his grace, he brings them to the Holy Spirit. They can't resist it. They're powerless to this. It's almost like a religious type of passion. The idea of being irresistible has a lot of language associated with it that you will see with romantic love. That's interesting when you're reading these texts, if you're looking for that or if you notice that. You also see that idea of romantic love and even some language that oddly can sometimes overlap with sexual language. You see that reflected in contemporary Christian music, like Christian radio, and in a lot of art from the Middle Ages and after, the Renaissance in particular, when you see statues and paintings of saints in what appears to be ecstasy, as in sexual ecstasy, in this salvation. So all really interesting overlaps here with art and other things. The P is for perseverance of the saints. This is the work of God to save the elect, but it's God who perseveres, not the saints themselves. The saints are those who've been elected. So it's only, again, through God's will that people have their salvation. God perseveres, technically, not the saints themselves. But by that, the saints, they've been elected. It's understood that they will go to heaven. Unlike in the Catholic Church, which says people can lose their salvation. So technically only God gives it, but the way Calvin spins it is that those who are elect can remain elect forever. If you want to know more about this, it's easy to find online, but I recommend a working understanding of tulip. I wouldn't tell you that you have to memorize all of this, but to understand some of the overarching broad concepts in it. I'm just bringing the devil back around to emphasize the devil as the inverse of humans, as the representation of their desires, as the representation of anxieties in their culture, as a representation of what is considered inhuman, non-human, or alien, and therefore there's a strong connection to how early Americans saw American Indians as pagans, and a connection into the idea of witchcraft, with which I think most of you are familiar because I asked you if you'd read the Crucible, so you have working knowledge of the Salem witch trials, which is incredibly interesting. I just wanted to take note here that it wasn't the only witch trial. There were many others before in Salem. They were just smaller. There were many more in England. We don't talk about those much in America. We tend to focus on the American witch trials and almost always exclusively Salem. But what was so different about Salem was the high number of accusation. 19 men and women and 2 dogs were hanged. The dogs were hanged because they were familiars to the witches. So it's the helper. It's the form that the witch would pour the power into to help. So you often see this in pop culture depicted as the witch's black cat. But in the Salem witch trials, it was actually dogs that were implicated. Kind of an interesting piece of trivia there. In Cotton Mather's Wonders of the Invisible World, he's writing about spectral evidence. So that's testimony that witnesses have been afflicted by the accused witch's specter or apparition. In other words, what that means is if somebody said they saw a specter or a ghost or a spirit or an apparition, so just, think of some of these shows that you see on TV with ghost hunters and so forth, they could say they saw somebody visit them and perform some kind of witchcraft, and they use that as actual court evidence to send people to their deaths. The part of the witch trials that has it remaining so interesting in American history is that the judges encouraged confession. If you said you were a witch, you would not be executed. If you confessed, you wouldn't be killed, but then you would be considered a witch and you'd be ostracized from your community, probably kicked out, you'd lose all your money. So it's hard for us to grasp, because if you say you're innocent, they'd put you to death if you'd been accused. So that brings us to Cotton Mather and the readings. What does this all tell us about the Puritan social order? What's happening socially that would drive some of these accusations? What does it tell you about beliefs? How does he use the concept of Satan and evil, which we've been talking about a lot here? How does he use that to enforce rules? What type of hysteria do you see in this? When else do you see hysteria in American history? If you know some about American history, you know that Arthur Miller wrote The Crucible about the Salem witch trials as an allegory for McCarthyism in the 1950s and the communist witch hunts. Another really fascinating aspect of American history. Mather ends up coming off as a depraved witch hunter. He was a scholar, a logician. He was a very learned man. And I think we might tease out some sort of conflict between this logical scholarly mind and this witch hunter behavior that we see reflected in his work. In all cases, what we see in his writings is the devil as an anthropomorphic figure. An anthropomorphic figure, that's ANTHROPOMORPHIC. I'm going to spell that one more time. ANTHRO, anthro, P-O, morphic, MORPHIC. Anthro meaning man or person, and then pomorphic meaning changing into or representative of. You see the word morph in this. When you say something is anthropomorphic, it's taking on the attributes of humanity. So in Christian doctrine and in Old Testament doctrine and the Christian and Hebrew Bibles, if we use the word Bible, that's not exactly correct for the Pentateuch and the Torah. We see different representations of God, sometimes like a person, and we're told in Genesis, in the first book of the Bible, that man is created in the image of God. But if you identify anthropomorphism in God, you might question whether or not, in fact, man made God in the image of himself. Now, I'm not saying this to try to get you to believe anything or purport any views of my own. I'm trying to get you to look at how God is represented in these texts and how the people who wrote them used what they were writing about in order to gain things socially, with power, with control. They're using terror, that idea of horror again that came up in class. horror movies, crime, folk beliefs, how all these things merged, and that how they're happening at the same time that we have the emergence of the Enlightenment. So to go back to William Byrd, our Virginian, we can see him as much more of an Enlightenment thinker. I mean, it's easier to see than these other writers, but they all were Enlightenment thinkers. You may or may not have working knowledge of the Enlightenment from other classes. It's worth a nice quick web tour. Even if you go online and you look it up in Wikipedia, that would suffice just to have a working understanding of what I'm calling the Enlightenment here. This is a time in history, in Western history, when you see an emphasis on studying the world, discovering natural laws. The religious in America would have seen the discovery of natural laws as something that would bring a greater understanding of God. The secular thinkers, in other words, the non-religious thinkers, would have instead been creating what we now consider foundational to all science as something that emphasizes much more worldly concerns and not always as much a reflection of God's will. I have this image here. This is a cabinet filled with different discoveries. There's like seashells and bones and things. Because during the Enlightenment, you would have your great thinkers. So just think for a minute. Isaac Newton is one. Linnaeus is another. Linnaean classification systems in biology. The foundation of biology emerging in this period, because there was a fascination with classifying the world and collecting it and studying it for evidence of God's creation. How that information was used differed widely depending on whether someone was a Calvinist or a secular humanist, emphasizing what these beliefs mean for study not associated directly with the church. An explanation of the natural world was part and parcel of all of this and leads to things we're going to talk about much, much more over the next few weeks. So you're going to see evidence of this in Ben Franklin as well. We're going very quickly through this material because the Great Awakening, I'm going to give you a date for this, let's say 1740. And the term itself wasn't invented until 1840 by a man named Joseph Tracy. You don't have to write that down. I just want you to have the context that during this time, nobody actually called it the Great Awakening in the 1740s. It was an invention in its own time, this idea of awakening, of coming to God's grace on one's own. That's a lot different from what I was just talking about with Calvinism and the idea of only God giving grace. And the idea in the Great Awakening that emerged from ministers such as Jonathan Edwards said that people could, on their own, come to God's grace and be reborn. You'll hear in what I'm saying right now aspects of what is fundamental to many, many, if not most, contemporary understandings of Christianity. So you would have revivals trying to get people to join the church, evangelism, the spreading of God's word, crucicentrism, an emphasis on Christ dying for one's sins, and a grace-based faith that required people to show their spirituality, that they'd been saved, but emphasized faith far more than the works. A faith and a belief and an understanding was emphasized over works that people performed to show that they'd been saved. It's a lot to take in, I realize. as we're looking at this, because these are heavy hitting ideas. This is not going to be the only time I'm going to talk about them in this class. You have Edwards as, I'm going to say, a voice of the Enlightenment, just like Ben Franklin, although you're going to see they're very, very different when you read Franklin. He was interested in science. He had a similar agenda as Wigglesworth with the Day of Doom. But his sermons, they're meant, even though you see a little bit of variety in what I assigned, you see this fire and brimstone and bringing of fear, but don't forget the purpose was to bring people together in community. That's vital to an understanding of Edwards. He wanted to bring people into the church, spread the word of God, and bring people into the fold. Use Enlightenment ideas of understanding the world to further his religious agenda. So he's using a lot of language in all of the readings that shows experience, extended metaphors with storms, floods, spiders, and pits. Some questions for Edwards you might want to entertain. Where do you sometimes see compassion in sinners, not just condescension or wild accusation? It's that sermon is most famous for its terrifying parts. But there are a great number of parts when Edwards is saying, come to God so you don't have to face those things. I want you to think about why Edwards is not remembered for his gentler writings, such as, here, did I list it on here? I didn't. A divine and supernatural light. How come Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God is more famous? I guess I start to answer this in this third bullet. Hell has more interesting literary possibilities than heaven. So, what are the challenges? If you're an author, what are the challenges of writing about the supremely beautiful? I just want to bring the Jeremiah back around. I talked about this in yesterday's lecture. I'm adding to it a little bit here. The three parts were on yesterday's slide. I didn't emphasize what I have here at the bottom, that this type of sermons are public discourse. They're meant for a public audience. They play on the hopes and fears of an audience. They look at the relationship between self and society. And in the case of this course, we're looking at all of these texts, religious and secular, with an understanding that they present America as a promised land and a utopia, whether or not in the context of Calvinism. All right, that's a lot to take in for today. We will keep returning to these ideas in class, so I will give you a heads up on what I'm looking for on the quiz because that was such a large amount of information. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.